Hi, welcome back to being the best version of yourself podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Carey Heller. Today, we have an awesome guest and a great topic. All right, Morgan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here. I'm Morgan. I am the founder of Positive Play Project, which is a platform and space all about creating a positive youth sports experience through education and practical tools for the adults that ultimately shape the culture and experience of our kids. So, yeah, happy to be here and chat with you today.
Great. So, obviously, this idea of positive sports. Tell us a little bit about sort of, I guess, why that's so important.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, sports were such an influential and pillar cornerstone piece of my life growing up. I've told the story before. My parents divorced when I was 9. I moved to a whole new state at that time. And sports was really just a way for me to build a community and find an outlet that was positive to create like a safe, happy space in a whole new world. And throughout my schooling and into college, it was, it kept me out of trouble. It kept me busy and taught me so many life skills that I fully attribute to any success that I've had today as an adult. The lessons that I learned and the skills in sport, I think fully gave me the foundation to have that success later on. And so my hope is that we can create that experience for lots of children and as many children as possible. And so that's why it's so important, just because of the own impact that it's had on my life.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I guess it sort of really brings up the question, with youth sports. Obviously, if you're trying to maintain something a certain way, but there's element of oftentimes begs the question: are there problems with youth sports today? And if so, what are they? Or
Yeah.
your perspective. Obviously, I'm sure everyone
Yeah.
has a different viewpoint on this.
Sure. I think it's an interesting space right now. I've had the opportunity to connect with so many different leaders and coaches and parents, like all across the US. And I think what's so interesting is that regardless of what state you're in, or league, or city, or rule, like the same issues, if you want to call them that, seem to be like a very consistent thread throughout. And I think youth sports has, clearly been monetized in a new sort of way maybe than when we were playing, and the commercialization of it is different. And so I think that the through line of what the issue is the pressure that is put on young athletes at a much earlier age. And at the end of the day, we want kids playing sports, right, for as long as possible and enjoying it and having fun with their friends. And whether that pressure is coming from like the need to specialize early, or parents not understanding how the type of conversations they're having are maybe indirectly putting pressure, or coaches setting a culture that's creating this additional pressure. I think that the creating that pressure on athletes earlier in their career, earlier in their sports experience is ultimately the through line of what's causing a lot of kids to quit. 70% of kids are quitting by age 13, and the youth sports world seems like to be all up in arms of the experience is like wild out there, and everyone's having like these crazy experiences. And yeah, I think it's the pressure for the kids is the big piece of it, and the adults' behaviors and responsibility. To me, the responsibility is on the adults to ultimately change that, or make it better from where it's at.
And then in terms of the pressure, I think that definitely is an important point that definitely I think impacts a lot.
Mhm.
And what do you feel like are the biggest factors probably that are driving that pressure?
I think the cost of youth sports is a big piece of it. I think I've seen a lot of. I think they're meant to be silly or funny posts. Like an example is like, if my kid's out there wearing a car payment's worth of gear, then he better show up and play. And so the cost just, it's a lot of resources for a family to put into their child to participate and play on the team that they want to play on or do the sport. And so I think that inherently then the f the pressure, it comes from that they've invested a lot of resources into something. I think that the NIL has made a big difference of that, if parents and kids see an opportunity much earlier on, it's not only in professional sports that you can make a significant amount of money in your sports career, and so I think that's changed the game of it. And then I think that the business of youth sports has just created this additional layer of parents wanting their kids to be on the best team, leagues telling families that we're the best, and, your kid should play here to have these types of results. And so there's not just one thing. I think there's a combination of a lot of things, but yeah, it's complex, it's to say the least. It's not just.
Right. Well, yeah, I figured it was not
Yep.
one thing, but I think,
Yep.
what you're illustrating is, a lot of things that probably people listening, in some shape or form have experienced. But I think it
Yep.
also depends, obviously, on how old your child is. And, obviously, to some degree,
Sure.
sort of, if they're already playing on some sort of higher level team, if they're still playing rec, there's different sort of differences in where parents may be in all this. Or, parents are listening and have gone through all this already and are kind of looking at it from the other end. And the same thing where sometimes it can vary from one child to the next, even the same
Yep.
family, because it's also you have a sense from one child what to some degree what works, what doesn't. Because the big thing is, I think part of what I mean you haven't directly said, but maybe alluded to, is this idea of the knowledge of like
Yep.
what to actually expect. That if theoretically a child were to, let's say, I don't know, play baseball or basketball, and they're in the same league the entire time they play, and there's nothing else, no decisions to be made, you just keep going year after year. That's one thing, but that's not really how a lot of sports work these days.
Yeah.
Especially, if you're moving, beyond a rec league. And so, but I
Yep.
think that's where when there's so many different options for teams, parents sometimes in clubs, parents are often at a loss and they rely either on information they're given by, what they see online or other parents or, this group of kids are going to go do this league. So let me go follow so they can play with their friends, not
Mhm.
necessarily knowing like that much about the league itself.
Yes, I agree. There's definitely more choices than ever, which I think can be great, right? I hope that there's a lot of access for a lot of kids to have the opportunity to play. But you're right, there's not a lot of guidance, and it's kind of a new sports world. It's different than when we were playing, and so figuring out how to navigate that as a family and as a parent, is a challenge for sure. There's a lot of inputs, I think, coming in from lots of different angles that they're trying to figure out what is the right choice for us, right choice for my kid, right choice for our family, and, yeah, it's not easy. That's for
Right.
sure.
And I also think there are a lot of families that even if the child's not even focused on playing in high school or college for a sport, there's still this strong focus on, continue to kind of move up and play at a higher level, even if there's not
Mhm.
really a sense of any sort of end goal that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a balance because on the one hand, certainly if you have a player who's especially good, that they're going to obviously probably excel more if they're playing with people that, that are better and they keep working at it. If they're not continuing to improve in the same way because they're not playing at a level, with people that are somewhat comparable, I think that's very different than a parent who keeps
Yeah.
just trying to move their child up to a different level because they think it's the right decision.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the best thing a parent can do is guide their child, but really, like, let them be the driver, right? If they want to continue to grow and play and they're passionate about the sport and they wanna be challenged in a different sort of way, then, like, let's find the right team for them to be able to do that. They just love playing and being with their friends, and that's what's most important. They don't care about going on to play later on, and there's hopefully a great environment for them to do that too. I think where to your point, like, because there's so many options and maybe my friends are now going over here or one parent told me about this league. I truly think being really clear with yourself as a parent and your athlete and your family about like what are our goals? What is most important to us? What are we looking to get out of this experience? And then you have to do a little bit of homework, I think, these days and try to find out like what is the culture of this league? What is the expectation? Is my kid going to be able to play another sport while they're playing this one? Or how many games are they doing versus how many practices? Like all of those things I think matter into making the right decision for you. I don't think that there's not one right answer for everyone. I think it's different for every family. But to your point, just knowing what your athlete wants to do and where they want to go, what's important right now, and kind of helping guide them to make those decisions together is how I'm approaching it and how I would encourage other families
Yes.
to kind of navigate that tough course.
No, I mean, I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, each child is different. So you have to look
Yeah.
at the needs of the child, but also needs of the family. And the idea that, depending on how time intensive, a specific league is or team,
Hmm.
obviously it impacts the family as a whole, having to get the kids to the practices, to the games. If it's an all weekend tournament, a lot of the times that takes up a lot of time,
Yeah.
various financial resources, lots of different sort of pieces, and obviously the impact on other kids in the family as well. So you
Yeah.
sort of have to look at all these different pieces together to figure out what is the, best balance and the right fit, for your child and the family as a whole, while also recognizing that, there's also the aspect of, helping your child to be well rounded. That,
Yeah.
even if they love soccer, if they're playing soccer, several, I don't know, 5, 6 days a week, and they really don't have time for anything else. Like if they like music, but they don't have time to take lessons because they're too busy playing soccer.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, they would go to religious school, but they miss it most of the time because of soccer. For example, that,
Sure.
again, can impact other things. And also at some level, part of it also is, as kids get older, there's often less opportunities where there's a focus on playing sports on a team with friends. It's often about, what team you make, not necessarily sort of having friends on the team.
Yeah, I
And so I
agree.
think the
Yeah.
social piece definitely plays, should, I think certainly it's very valuable, and I think should be a strong consideration when someone's looking at sports as well.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, my kids are fairly young still, so we're kind of in that staying in that rec space for now with them, and a lot of it is, like, I was messaging with my friend the other day of, like, "Is Everett gonna do this league and doing baseball for sure in the fall? Because if he is, then her son will do it too," and because we just know that they're such good friends that they play in the same league, they'll have more fun, and so but again, we're, yeah, on the young side, and that rec space is available to them. Yeah, but I think that's definitely a challenge as they continue to get older. I forget which podcast I heard it on. I saw a clip of someone was saying one of the greatest things that we could do maybe is bring, like, intramural sports back to high school where there's just this opportunity to play for everyone, at not necessarily such a intense level, and I thought that was a really interesting take, and I would love to see, regardless of if it's intramural or rec leagues through the city or some opportunity for kids through high school to have an opportunity to continue to play sports if that's what they wanna do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would love to see that as well because I think it's
Yeah.
really valuable. And again, there's some kids that, really love playing a sport, but for a variety of reasons, either just they don't have the skill level to play at a high level, or they just really don't want to, or they play a
Mhm.
sport, but they want to do a bunch of other stuff and they can't fit in that sport if they're doing other things. Having rec leagues available much longer term, through high school
Yep.
would be great. And again, there are certainly some leagues that do offer rec leagues through high school. Again, not
Yep.
by far, not all do. And the other part is I think when you have kids that, are maybe on the better side for a rec league, but don't necessarily, can't quite meet that threshold for the next level. That's where I think a lot of times kids sort of get stuck. And that,
Yeah.
it's hard because I think also as kids get older, if there's, less of a pool of kids within a rec league, sometimes that can impact the level of play that's available in a rec league. And you sort of kids that fall sort of in between the two,
Yep.
sometimes don't have many good options for, sticking with a sport.
Yeah.
But I do think
Yeah,
also
it's
that I
so
think a lot
true.
of I think people also, at least my perception, is a lot of times I think people undervalue rec leagues, and there can be a lot of benefits of it. And in a lot of cases, I don't feel like there, at least from my personal perspective, is I don't feel like there should necessarily be a rush to leave a rec league. Like I think a lot, it really like if it's a good fit for your child,
Yep.
I think stick with it as long as you can. Because that's probably the easiest way to have opportunities for kids to play with their friends and get that
Mhm.
social aspect. Because it's once you leave that rec league, the likelihood of being able to play with friends is far less as you get older in this.
Yes, I agree. I am fully on board for the we're gonna stay in the rec leagues as long as possible. Yeah, I mean, I played, like, I played AAU basketball and, like, I played some travel softball like, and those were fun experiences, but I think having the opportunity to play lots of different sports, to be playing in your own town, in your community with your friends that you go to school with, and do other things on the weekends while they're younger definitely is important, and definitely important for me as I'm navigating that with my children. Now, I coach club level volleyball myself, like, separately. My kids don't play that yet, but, so I see both sides of it. I get the kids who are really passionate about the sport that they're doing and are playing up, into high school and potentially beyond. So I understand both sides that I
Yeah.
do really value the opportunity to play lots of different sports. Like I was thinking about when I was in high school, my very best friend, we're still best friends to this day. Our freshman year, we played tennis doubles. I had never really played tennis before, but it was like with the spring season. So I didn't have another sport going on particularly that I do through the school. And it was like, we still talk about to this day. We had like matching yellow visors. We were terrible, but we had so much fun. And, it's not a typical sport that I would play, but I had the opportunity to try something new, even in high school where I was playing like club volleyball and pretty much year round at that point. I was still able to do that with my school. And so I think that is important that kids can still do something or try something new and have fun and, play with their friends. That's what, Ellie and I still talk, laugh about our yellow visors and how silly and, but it was such a good time.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think it brings up the point that it's really helpful, certainly for kids, for riders to play a lot of different sports. But it's
Hmm.
also when those opportunities present themselves to try a new sport, it's often worth it. If the kid wants to try it, to try to make it work so that they can. Because
Yeah,
while you can obviously try sports as you get older, it does get harder.
for
Because if you
sure.
find a sport that you really like, it gets challenging. If you're starting to play it in high school, well, obviously people can do that depending on the sport. It does get harder in terms of if someone's been playing for many years, it makes it more challenging to sort of keep up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's definitely sure, you're gonna, like, develop your skills more if you're focused on one sport per se, but I do think that there's, like, a level playing field that kinda happens, especially in, like, early high school, puberty is hitting, like, growth spurts are happening, and so maybe if you weren't great at one sport or were great at one sport previously, there can kind of be, like, a shift, and there's almost like a reset where hopefully then parents are encouraging their kids to maybe try the sport again or try something different if that's not, the one that they've been doing as often or that they were passionate about before. So yeah, it's an interesting. I don't have all the answers per se, but I do think that having the right framework or like the right questions to ask or the right perspective, hopefully that's what we can continue to like have conversations like this and share with parents so that as they're navigating this journey that's unique to them that they have a little bit of some tools to help them make the best decisions.
No, absolutely. And I think your point about this idea of kind of this, change over time, it sounds like sort of maybe in the middle school into high school years, opportunities to
Yeah,
do sports is definitely true. Because there are obviously a lot of sports that, kids don't really have the same access to play, until let's say middle school or high school. Like,
sure.
for example, crew and, track and field in a lot of cases and run cross
Yeah,
country that, there may be some teams at elementary school level, but I don't think it's super common from what I know.
yeah,
And volleyball is also
agreed.
another sport where, again, obviously, I think it's really hard. I can't imagine a 4-year-old play like in the same way being able to have the skill set to do it.
Sure.
So I think that there's certain sports that when you get older, you get more exposure and the ability to start playing. But also
Yeah.
by playing sports when kids are younger, even if like let's say they start playing soccer and play, let's say through elementary school, even if they don't keep playing soccer, having that athleticism from that sport really can translate well into other sports as well. So helping your kids to just be active and stay physically fit can really help put them in a good position even to try new sports later on.
Agreed. I didn't play volleyball until I think it's 6th grade. Middle school is when or 7th grade, I'm not even sure. Like when it was becomes available through school, and then it was just 1 season, and I didn't play club volleyball until 8th or 9th grade, which comparative to nowadays is so much I was, like, way late to the game then, but, you know, it worked out for me. But I think I had worked played so many other different sports and had tried so many different things that to your point, like, you build a hand-eye coordination, different athleticism through lots so just like being a well-rounded athlete will then I think open doors for whatever sport you ultimately decide if that's what you choose to pursue down the road. Yeah,
Exactly, and also sometimes when people first try a sport, they're not very good at it, or there are,
sure.
other factors that make
Most
it
of the time,
challenging.
yeah.
Right, well, yeah, usually,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I remember because 'cause I'd played volleyball quite a bit, and so I think when I started playing in 8th grade, I remember, like, at that point, I couldn't even reach the top of the net.
Yeah,
And, obviously, I came a long way by the high school, but just the fact of, like, being able to play and not I mean, I don't think I could even serve the ball overhand over the net the first year I played.
sure.
Just,
Yeah,
because that age, like, size-wise, just, didn't have the same level of, endurance and various other things that,
yeah.
kinda gathered once I got into high school. But, so again, I think it's this idea that there certainly things change and you can try new sports, or a lot of times, like, I see people will do, track or cross country where even if maybe you're not the best athlete, it's good exercise, it gives you an opportunity to be part of a
Mhm,
team. And so there's
mhm.
a lot of options if kids want to play a sport and be part of a team, even if certain skill sets are not the best at it. But it's also a willingness to some degree to be willing to work on it and creating that self motivation.
Yeah. Yeah, again, like, the skills, life skills that you'll learn through that you can learn through sport, I think ultimately is what's most important, right? The, like, willingness to be bad at something at first and continue to show up and improve and understand that anytime someone tries something new, they're gonna likely not be great at it and that that's okay, and learning to persevere past that is take them a lot further in their life than any, basketball skill or volleyball skill would. So, yeah. Yeah, I see that in my I think I've shared it in my regular life, in my corporate in my world, and I work in corporate recruiting, and so, the skills that I've said this before, like when a candidate comes through the pipeline that was a former athlete, whether that's college or even into high school, like hiring teams are thrilled to see that because they typically are going to see that person have a set of traits or skills that are gonna serve them well. That's like high drive for results, resiliency, ability to like get things done and not give up, be a great team player. All of those skills you learn through sport, which then ultimately take you into whatever you decide to do in your career later on. And so to me, I think that that's what's most important, right? That we are giving kids the opportunity to learn those skills in a safe space at a younger age to build that resilience and that comfortableness of being uncomfortable in something that maybe you're not good at or that you fail at. You don't win every game and then translate that to being a better teammate and human later on in life.
And I think that's a
Yeah.
really powerful message. The idea that the skill sets that kids can learn through sports can really help them obviously in day-to-day life at that time, but certainly as an adult as well. And that it's
Yep.
really a lot of the same life skills you learn through sports, really are beneficial, off the field or court as well.
Yeah, for sure. And also just the community that you built. I am still friends with so many of my club team members and college team members. And I think having those relationships and learning to like navigate that with people that, you care about and care about you kind of just there's like a lot of people I could just call anytime. And it's not only in sport that you that, right? I think in any sort of activity that you're working together with other people, you build this like bond and relationship. But, sports is certainly one of the ways to do that. And I think that that's a valuable skill to learn how to navigate friendships and tough things with people together. Goes just beyond, once you leave the field, those skills stay with you. So
Right. Exactly.
it's important. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I know we've, touched base kind of a little bit on stuff with the parent perspective on navigating things. And I mean, here's the thoughts. I know you mentioned earlier today about, talking to various organizations, on kind of this idea of, making sports more positive. And I'm wondering at the league level, do you have any suggestions of what leagues could do in
hmm
order to sort of, make things better for kids,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good question. And I'm kind of navigating this literally as we speak. I took over as president of a local league where I live. And so actively thinking about how do I, create a more positive, better experience for these kids. And as I've been chatting with other league leaders throughout the US, yeah, it's again complex, but I think that, and I say this like in the corporate world and in most areas of our life, communication is always the problem and most often the solution. So I think when you can get really clear about what's the culture you want for your organization, what are the standards that we're upholding, what are the goals for our athletes at different levels, and communicate that clearly to the coaches that you decide to allow to be a part of that, the families and athletes that then are going to opt in to have that type of experience. They know what they're getting. I think just sets everyone up for success in creating the right experience. So you're a part of a league that's the right experience for you. Not every league needs to have the same culture or the same goals, but when you're transparent and clear about what those are for your athletes and coaches, then people can opt into that, right? And then also when there are issues, because there will be, hopefully it's been very clear about what the expectations are, what maybe the repercussions are for not operating in a certain way, and it's just going to be a much easier situation to handle and navigate when it's not there's no surprises. Oh, I didn't know we weren't supposed to, I didn't know playing time needed to be even or, however, whatever issues are coming up. So I think it's communication,
Uh,
is,
uh,
is the
uh,
fastest way to get a positive
Yeah, no, I
experience.
mean, I really agree with you. I mean, I think the communication is crucial for a league. And
Yeah.
I think it brings up the fact that, recognizing that leagues operate differently. Some convey most information to parents directly, and the coaches just kind of send some on scheduling. Others put a lot on the coaches to do a lot of the direct communication. So I think
hmm
for leagues to sort of navigate that piece, but also recognize that people are busy and that if you send lots of emails that have so much information, people can't weed through it. Or like
Yeah.
even how you convey stuff about the schedules. That, a lot of leagues do use various apps. Some are, I think, are certainly better than others, but also trying to
Yeah.
make it as easy as possible for people to sort of understand the schedule, know what to expect, things like that. I think that makes a huge difference in, certainly kids showing up to games, parents understanding what to do, and
Yeah.
also just understanding the expectation. Like to your point about, playing time rule, that obviously some leagues have, a lot of leagues have very specific rules around playing time. Some,
hmm
especially rec leagues, there is something about fairness. To some degree, sometimes, they're variable, but I think also understanding how that works,
Yeah.
and to communicate that to parents, but also it brings up the point that for coaches, a lot of cases for coaches to be very direct with parents on the expectations like within their team, and then
hmm
it straight to the league what their expectations are, how they approach things. Because,
Yeah.
sometimes they may have a very systematic way of doing things, but if the parents, all they see is the output, they don't necessarily see what goes on behind the scenes. So I think if issues arise, being able to communicate all that directly of how you do things with parents can often help, mitigate issues.
Yeah, it's so true. I just connected with a gentleman on through our platform, and he's a coach, and he shared the packet with me that he sends out ahead of any season, and it was like his philosophy, what's to be expected, reemphasizing this 24-hour rule, no, asking parents to come and talk to him, after that time, like he wants this dialogue, he wants to introduce, and I was like, this is so great. This is, I know that clearly you care about this experience so innately, so much more already. Like you're already trying to create this great experience. So when issues come up, it's going to be much easier for them to navigate. And to me, it's like just yeah, everybody's busy. Most of these volunteer coaches are working full time also, or have families and other things. Like we ask a lot, I think, of our especially volunteer coaches that are just trying wanting to sign up to so that kids can play because they need coaches. And so to your point, like giving them tools or the right platforms to make those communications more efficient, or like ideas of like I'll hopefully adopt something similar in this league where I can just like send out a template to our new coaches that maybe they can fill out a little bit of information about themselves and send that out to the team, and just again open that dialogue with the parents, and the communication can flow freely and easier so that it's not only getting brought up when there's an issue.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think, having the templates and, if each coach have their own style, and, if that makes
Yep.
sense, but having something to start off. Because I think that also brings up the point that a lot of times, I think a lot of leagues, especially volunteer coaches, don't always give a whole lot of training resources. That,
Sure.
and there may be a focus on the skill sets of certain things, but not about like the aspects of navigating stuff with parents or
Yep.
communication with things like that that I think a lot of times leagues don't really focus on very much. And so I think in general, for leagues to focus on more volunteer coach trainings for things, I think can really go a
Mhm.
long way towards helping things.
Yeah. It's actually something I've been really thinking about and working on it with Positive Play Project, is thinking about how do you create almost like an operating system, or like a set of tools that a league can adopt that allows those things, like give coaches and the league easy templates, or like SOP structure to be able to kind of navigate those things, so that it's not like I'm taking over this league and you know don't have to create everything from scratch. Obviously, things exist, but if I ever want to hand this off to the next person, like how do I set them up for success, or invite other board members to be a part of it without so much work, like so much work that they're maybe not going to join to be a part of it because of that, versus I'm a professional. Yes, I work, but I want to also contribute and make a positive impact. So I can step into this role knowing that I'm not starting from scratch, and I can, share my ideas or influence what needs to be influenced to make a positive impact without it requiring such a heavy load, both for, the board or coaches and other people that are wanting to be a part of it too. So
Yeah,
we'll
well,
see
and I
how that
think
goes.
I think
Yeah.
having a standard operating practice with the template, but even just a communication system that each league uses in terms of
Yeah.
how they put the schedule out, how they share the information, how coaches communicate. I mean, one of the things I always think is really interesting is when you think about how many like Team Snap and some of the other apps, a lot of them have an option about availability. But what do you do if you have parents that are not very good at remembering to hit the button to accept to say that their child or teen is coming to the game?
Yeah.
So I think that there are different approaches. I think knowing the families that you're coaching and whether it makes sense to do it that way, whether it's, if people are pretty good about it, to only have them, if they're not coming. Again, I think you can do it different ways, but I think for
Yeah.
each coach to recognize what works best, for their individual team, or if there's, league rule on that. But I think also
Yeah.
recognizing that just because you put stuff in an app and send out message doesn't mean that all parents are actually seeing it.
Sure. Yeah, it's true. Depending on like which parents sign them up,
Right, well,
if
exactly,
both
and some of the
parents are
apps are
on
not
there.
some of the apps don't let a coach actually put in the other parent, like, the other parent has to, hit a button to actually be able to, and some of them are very hard to work, even with that, it's really challenging to add another parent in,
Sure.
so, the problem is if they're not very into it, then you're gonna have one parent scaling information, especially if that parent's not the one that's often taking the child to things, definitely there
Right.
can be a lack of an issue with communication.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. So I'm surprised that we haven't solved that a little bit better yet. Because I think that's a pretty common issue that a lot of leagues and parents and coaches are seeing. So I'm interested to see what comes out of that. But to your point, I remember in my kids' lacrosse league in the spring, the app had them scheduled for some games over what was our spring break time. And so a family had like adjusted their family vacation because they wanted to be available for those games. Well, it turns out like we weren't actually playing those games. They were just in there. And I remember that family was like, gosh, I really wish I would have known that before I had, changed all these plans. And so to your point, like it does significantly impact the experience for families or athletes and parents to have easy access to that information and it be accurate and all of those really important things that's like the administrative side. That's a lot of time and effort and work that I think maybe deters some volunteers from wanting to be a part of it.
Right. No, I think that's true. And I think it's also like figuring out developing your own system. Like, so what I do, for example, the teams I coach is I use, for most of them, I use Team Snap. So even though I don't think any of the leagues I could coach actually use Team Snap as like the primary thing, I basically enter everything in there because it's an app that, a lot of parents have been using for several years. And
Mhm.
also because I'm adding it in, it gives me the ability to actually add in all parents and people that make sense for each. child, as
Yep.
opposed to the league only letting you put in whichever kind of registered the child. And so I basically do that. I put that in, so it's the whole schedule and everything. And then what I do is I use a Google group, so I have all the email addresses for everyone in a Google group. And then once a week, I send an email. I have a template. I send email with reminders for the week. There, I duplicate that email and just pop it into Teamsnap and send email. So this way, for people that use an app more, they pay attention to notifications. For people that really do better with email, they get a direct email.
Yeah. That's
So I find something like
awesome.
that works
Yeah.
where, I mean, here's the thing. Like, there's obviously, on the one hand, there are probably a lot of people that are obviously paying attention, may get sort of essentially two email notifications about it. But again, the benefit then is that I'd rather people get more reminders and know everything rather than like omit something and then have a problem. Like a lot of times,
Sure.
like I know a lot of teams will use the team chat function. Like I see a lot of things online of people joking about the idea of the ridiculous things that people ask about in a team chat.
Sure.
But the problem is
Yeah.
that anything like that, you have to scan through so much to get the information that it's very easy to miss stuff.
Yep. Yep. I agree. I again, like having access to information easily, like the communication of it piece makes it so much easier and it's going to run smoother, right? Your athletes are going to show up where they need to be on time. They're going to be wearing the right uniform. If you've, found a way to make sure that everybody has that information
Right,
clearly
exactly.
and
Yeah, what uniform to
yeah.
wear, and I think also, for coaches, if you have kids on a team that have a hard time remembering certain stuff, figuring out giving stuff that the kids could actually use themselves, whether it's like a written, checklist of here's what you need to bring to each game, like a schedule that especially if they're younger, can print out or bring to practice and hand out. This way, that helps
Yeah.
create ownership of the kids, help them to learn to keep track of their own stuff more.
Yes. I just was wrote an article about this and for this week. Yeah, I think that again, these like life skills that you can learn through youth sports of like being responsible for my own things but also to your point, giving them tools like a checklist or other things that allow them to be successful and not just remember all your stuff, but you can't ask an 8-year-old to know all of the things that they're supposed to bring every time without setting them up for success. So,
Right. So I think make sure they have the support. And again, if it's hard for the parent to help as well with some of it, to, figure out how can you essentially, help both the parent and the child to make sure that
mhm.
they remember everything.
Yeah, yeah. That's great. I love that you do that.
Well, it was definitely a really great conversation. I think we definitely covered some really interesting stuff that hopefully will be helpful to a lot of people. And if people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Sure. Mostly, I think my content lives on Instagram, which is at Positive Play Project, and my Substack, which is the same name, Positive Play Project, and then my website has links to find all of those things, which is thepositiveplayproject.com.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Well, and for those of you listening, if you like this episode, definitely subscribe to future episodes and share with someone who might benefit and tune in for
awesome.
future episodes. And Maury, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Carrie. It was a pleasure to be here.